The amber dawn of Xerion's distant sun cast long shadows across the research station's metallic hull, its rays struggling to penetrate the moon's perpetual haze. Dr. Elisa Marrow pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the alien landscape stretch endlessly before her. 6 months of isolation on this desolate rock had become her new normal, though the loneliness still gnawed at her like a persistent ache. Her latest report glowed on the holographic display behind her, documenting another successful cataloging of the moon's indigenous species. The Federation had sent her here under the guise of scientific research, but Elisa knew better. This was exile pure and simple. Humanity's reputation as an unpredictable species had earned them nothing but suspicion and fear from the galactic community. The Galactic Federation tolerated humans barely, but preferred to keep them at arm's length, or better yet, on isolated moons light years from civilized space. A soft chime from her communication console interrupted her thoughts. The holographic face of Commander Thex materialized his kittenous features, betraying no emotion as always. The Zelani were known for their cold efficiency, making them perfect administrators in the Federation's rigid hierarchy. Dr. Marrow. His translator rendered his clicking speech into standard galactic. Your research period on Xerion will be extended indefinitely. New priorities have emerged regarding your species' status within Federation space. Elisa's stomach dropped. Commander, I've completed my assigned research. My contract specifically states, your contract has been modified. Continue your work, Doctor. The Federation values your contributions. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Elisa staring at the empty space where the hologram had been. She slumped into her chair, her mind racing, extended indefinitely. The words echoed in her thoughts like a death sentence. What had changed? What new priorities could possibly justify keeping her stranded here? 3 days later, Elisa received her answer in the most terrifying way possible. The proximity alarms shrieked through the research station at 347 hours, jarring her from a restless sleep. She stumbled to the security console, her heart pounding as she pulled up the external sensors. A ship sleek, predatory, and utterly unfamiliar had landed approximately 2 kilometers from her station. The design was unlike anything in the Federation database, its hull seeming to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Elisa's hands trembled as she initiated the station's defensive protocols, sealing all entrances and activating the energy barriers. But even as she worked, a cold certainty settled in her chest. Whatever had arrived wasn't interested in negotiations or capture. This was something else entirely. She spent the next hour monitoring the external feeds, watching for any sign of movement from the alien vessel. Nothing. The ship sat silent and motionless against the rocky terrain like a sleeping beast. But Elisa could feel it watching her somehow. The sensation crawled along her spine like ice water. When dawn broke over Xerion's horizon, the ship was gone. The first direct encounter came 3 days later, while Elisa was collecting samples from the crystal formations near the northern ridge. The portable scanner beeped steadily as she documented the unusual electromagnetic properties of the formations. Her mind focused on her work, despite the underlying tension that had plagued her since the ship's arrival. A sound made her look up, a soft rustling that seemed out of place in the barren landscape. Elisa's breath caught in her throat as she saw it for the first time. The creature stood perhaps 30 meters away, partially hidden behind a cluster of crystalline spires. It was humanoid in shape, but unmistakably predatory. Its lean frame covered in what appeared to be adaptive camouflage that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, it possessed an otherworldly grace that spoke of perfect evolutionary design. Its head was angular, with features that suggested intelligence far beyond mere animal cunning. But it was the eyes that froze Elisa in place. Golden, luminous, and utterly alien, they studied her with an intensity that made her feel like a specimen under a microscope. This was no mere beast. This was a thinking, calculating entity, and it had found its target. For what felt like an eternity, They stared at each other across the empty expanse. Then, as silently as it had appeared, the creature melted back into the landscape, leaving Elisa alone with her racing heart and the certain knowledge that her time of safety had come to an end. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound outside the station, the wind through the crystal formations, the settling of metal as the temperature dropped made her jump. She paced her quarters, checking and rechecking the seals on every entrance. The creature, whatever it was, had found her. The question wasn't if it would return, but when. By the fourth night, exhaustion had begun to cloud her judgment. She dozed fitfully at her workstation, jerking awake at every imagined sound. It was during one of these half-conscious moments that she heard a soft scraping against the hull directly above her head. Elisa's blood ran cold. The creature was on her station. She moved slowly to the security console, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. The external cameras showed nothing but the audio pickups were registering movement across the upper hull. Whatever was up there was large, and it was systematically examining every surface. For hours, she tracked its progress as it circled the station. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of movement at the edge of the camera feeds, a flash of that liquid metal skin, the curve of a muscled limb. But the creature seemed to be taking its time studying rather than attacking. As dawn approached, the sounds ceased. Elisa watched the feeds until her eyes burned, but the creature had vanished once again. Exhausted and shaking, she finally collapsed into her chair, her mind reeling with questions. What was it waiting for? Why hadn't it simply torn through the hull and finished whatever mission it had been sent to complete? The answer came to her 3 days later in a moment of startling clarity. She was reviewing footage from the night visitations when she noticed something odd. In several frames, she could see the creature's eyes reflecting the station's lights. But rather than the predatory gleam she expected, there was something else there. Curiosity. Intelligence. Perhaps even hesitation. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. This creature, this apex predator sent to kill her, was studying her. Not just her defenses or her routines, but her. It was curious about her as an individual, not merely as a target. That night, Elisa made a decision that would have seemed insane just weeks before. When the familiar scraping sounds began above her quarters, she didn't retreat to the security console. Instead, she activated the external speakers and spoke into the silence. "I know you're there," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know what you are. But I also know you're not just a mindless killing machine. You're thinking about this, aren't you? About me." The scraping stopped immediately. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, impossible as it seemed, she heard a sound that made her heart skip, a soft thrum, almost musical, that seemed to emanate from directly above her. Over the following nights, these strange communications continued. Elisa would speak to the creature during its visits, sharing thoughts about her research, her life, even her fears. The creature would respond with various sounds, thrums, clicks, sometimes what seemed almost like wordless songs. It was a bizarre form of conversation that defied all logic, yet Elisa found herself looking forward to these exchanges. During the day, she began leaving small gifts outside the station samples of local flora. Interesting mineral formations, even some of her own food rations. Without fail, they would be gone by morning, though nothing else was disturbed. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into their strange relationship. Elisa was working late in her laboratory when she heard a sound that made her freeze the airlock cycling. Her blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. The creature wasn't prowling outside anymore. It was coming in. She grabbed an emergency beacon and backed against the far wall, her finger hovering over the activation switch. But the creature that emerged from the corridor wasn't the monster she had imagined. Oh, it was still clearly a predator. The coiled power in its movements, the subtle way it scanned its environment, spoke of deadly capability. But there was also something unexpectedly gentle in its approach. The being stood in the doorway, those golden eyes fixed on her face. Up close, she could see details that the cameras had missed. The adaptive camouflage skin seemed almost like living art, shifting in patterns that might have been some form of communication. Its facial features, while alien, held an intelligence and awareness that was unmistakably sentient. "Hello?" Elisa whispered. Not sure why she spoke, but feeling it was important to acknowledge this moment. The creature's head tilted slightly, and it made that soft, thrumming sound she had come to associate with what seemed like contentment. Slowly, deliberately, it raised one hand and pressed it against the transparent screen of her workstation, where she had been displaying images of Earth's predators for her research. The gesture was so human, so unexpectedly reaching, that Elisa felt tears spring to her eyes. This being this Hunter X-47, she had designated it in her private notes, wasn't here to kill her anymore. Somehow their strange communications had changed everything. Over the following days, a routine developed between them. Hunter X-47 would arrive after dark, always announcing itself with that soft thrum. Elisa would continue her work while the creature observed, occasionally moving closer to examine something that caught its interest. They communicated through gestures, sounds, and what could only be described as mutual understanding. Elisa learned that Hunter X-47 was far more than a simple predator. Its intelligence was vast, though expressed in ways that challenged human understanding. It seemed to comprehend her research intuitively, often directing her attention to specimens or formations she had overlooked. In return, she shared her knowledge, freely explaining human concepts and Earth's history through her work. The creature's origins remained mysterious. It possessed technology far beyond anything in the Federation databases, yet it seemed as comfortable in the wild as it did examining Elisa's most sophisticated equipment. Sometimes she caught it staring at the stars through the observation windows, and she wondered if it too felt the weight of isolation on this distant moon. 3 months into their unlikely partnership, everything changed again. The communication from the Federation arrived without warning. Commander Thex's image filled her screen, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood 2 other figures, Admiral Corvex of the Draxian Navy, and what looked like a human in Federation uniform. "Dr. Marrow." Thex began his translator, rendering his words with cold efficiency. "We regret to inform you that your research mission has been compromised. The entity designated Hunter X-47 was commissioned to terminate your assignment. Its failure to do so constitutes a security breach of the highest order." Elisa's blood turned to ice. They knew. Somehow they knew about her relationship with Hunter X-47. "A task force has been dispatched to Xerion." Admiral Corvex added his mechanical voice, betraying no emotion. "The entity will be recovered or destroyed. Your cooperation in this matter is expected. As for your status," the human officer spoke for the first time, and Elisa was shocked to recognize Colonel Morrison. A hardliner from Earth's military faction? The Federation Council has determined that humanity's influence on the galaxy has proven problematic. This incident will be cited as evidence of your species' dangerous unpredictability. The transmission ended, leaving Elisa staring at a blank screen. A task force. They were coming for Hunter X-47, and by extension for her. The creature she had come to consider a friend, perhaps the only true companion she had found in her exile, was in mortal danger because it had chosen companionship over killing. That night when Hunter X-47 arrived, Elisa was waiting. She had prepared everything she could think of: emergency supplies, copies of all her research, and a portable data core containing Earth's artistic and cultural records. The creature seemed to sense her agitation, immediately its golden eyes questioning. "They're coming," she said simply. "The Federation knows about us. They're sending ships to capture or kill you." Hunter X-47 tilted its head, then made a sound she had never heard before, a low, resonant note that seemed almost sad. It approached her slowly, and for the first time, reached out to touch her arm. Its skin felt warm through the adaptive mesh it wore, startlingly similar to human touch. In that moment, communication transcended words entirely. Somehow, whether through pheromones, electromagnetic fields, or something beyond human understanding, Elisa felt Hunter X-47's message clearly. It would protect her, not because of duty or programming, but because she had shown it something it had never experienced before: acceptance without judgment, curiosity without fear. The task force arrived 2 days later. 5 Federation cruisers, bristling with weapons and scanning equipment. Elisa watched from the observation deck as they assumed orbital positions around Zirion, their presence like a poison in the star-filled sky. Dr. Marrow, Admiral Corvex's voice crackled through the communication system. Prepare for immediate evacuation. Remain in your station and await transport. But Elisa was no longer in the station. 3 hours before the fleet arrived, she and Hunter X-47 had slipped away into the moon's treacherous landscape. The creature had led her to a place she had never seen before, a vast cavern system, hidden beneath the crystal formations, lit by bioluminescent organisms that painted the walls in ethereal blues and greens. Deep within the caverns, Hunter X-47 had revealed more of itself. The adaptive camouflage had retracted partially, showing Elisa that beneath the technological enhancement was a being of surprising beauty. Its natural skin had an almost pearlescent quality, and she could see what might have been scarification or natural markings that spoke of a rich cultural heritage. "You're not just a weapon, are you?" she whispered, running her fingers along one of the intricate patterns. "They took you from somewhere modified. You turned you into something you were never meant to be." Hunter X-47's response was a complex series of sounds and gestures that painted a picture of loss and forced transformation. Elisa understood then that they were both exiles in their own ways she banished for her species' perceived faults. Hunter X-47 molded into a killing tool by a Federation that saw value only in its lethality. For 3 days they evaded the search teams. The Federation forces swept the surface methodically, their scanners probing every crevice and formation. But Hunter X-47 knew this moon in ways that no scanner could detect, leading Elisa through passages that seemed impossible across terrain that should have been impassable. On the 4th day, the inevitable happened. Elisa woke to the sound of energy weapons firing in the distance. Hunter X-47 was already moving its camouflage flowing back into full combat configuration. Through gestures and that wordless communication they had developed, it made clear that the search teams had found their hiding place. They ran together through the crystalline landscape, Federation soldiers in pursuit. Elisa had never seen Hunter X-47 in full combat mode before. It moved like liquid death, every step calculated, every motion efficient. But it never left her side, never abandoned her for the speed that might have saved it alone. The confrontation came at the edge of a massive crystal chasm. Federation soldiers emerged from 3 directions, their weapons trained on both fugitives. Leading them was Colonel Morrison, his human features twisted with a mixture of duty and disgust. "Stand down, Dr. Marrow," he commanded. "Step away from the entity. Your government has negotiated for your safe return." "My government?" Elisa laughed bitterly. "The same government that exiled me to this rock that branded all of humanity as dangerous. You're not saving me, Morrison. You're eliminating a problem. The entity has clearly compromised your judgment." Admiral Corvex's voice came from his combat suit's speakers. "Our xenobiologists will study this anomalous behavior before the creature is terminated." That was when Hunter X-47 made its choice. The creature stepped forward, placing itself completely between Elisa and the Federation forces. Its camouflage shifted, and suddenly, Elisa could see what appeared to be a complex array of weapons and defensive systems emerging from its body. Hunter X-47 had been holding back during their entire relationship. The being she had come to know was only a fraction of what it truly was. "Please," Elisa called out, stepping beside her protector. "Look at what you're doing. This being has shown me more kindness and understanding than anyone in your precious Federation ever has. It chose to spare me when it could have killed me Easily. Doesn't that mean something? It means the entity is malfunctioning, Morrison replied coldly. Stand aside, Doctor. Final warning. The battle that followed was unlike anything Elisa had ever witnessed. Hunter X-47 moved with a speed and precision that seemed to bend reality itself. Federation weapons fire passed through spaces it had occupied milliseconds before, while its own response was devastatingly accurate. But it fought defensively, never striking to kill, always focused on protecting Elisa, rather than destroying its enemies. The tide turned when Admiral Corvex himself joined the battle, his powered armor giving him strength to match Hunter X-47's agility. The two clashed among the crystal formations, their conflict shattering the delicate structures and sending shards raining down like frozen tears. It was during this chaos that Elisa saw her chance. Hunter X-47's ship, the same vessel that had first landed on Xerion, sat unguarded in a nearby clearing. The creature had kept it hidden all this time, waiting for the right moment. Now, with Federation forces focused on their battle, that moment had come. "This way," she shouted, and Hunter X-47 immediately understood. Together they broke from the combat zone, racing toward the alien ship. Federation soldiers pursued them, but Hunter X-47's rearguard action kept them at bay until they reached the vessel. The ship's entrance opened at Hunter X-47's approach, recognizing its true pilot. Elisa rushed inside, marveling at the organic-looking interior that seemed to pulse with its own life. Hunter X-47 followed moments later, new wounds visible through tears in its camouflage skin. As the ship lifted off, Elisa saw through the viewports the Federation forces regrouping below. More ships were already moving to intercept them, but Hunter X-47's vessel proved surprisingly agile and well-armed. They fought their way through the orbital blockade, threading between massive Federation cruisers, while return fire lit up the space around them. Once they cleared Xerion's gravity well, Hunter X-47 engaged what could only be a hyperdrive. Though the technology seemed fundamentally different from anything Elisa knew, the stars stretched into lines, and suddenly they were elsewhere, somewhere far from Federation space. The ship settled onto what appeared to be a rogue planet, a world without a sun that drifted through interstellar space. But this world was not dead. Thermal vents and geothermal activity created warm zones, and bioluminescent life forms created a garden of light in the eternal darkness. "Is this your home?" Elisa asked as they disembarked. Hunter X-47's response was complex, yes and no. This was a place of refuge, one of many scattered throughout the galaxy for beings like it, a sanctuary for those who had been taken from their true homes and remade into weapons. In the months that followed, Elisa learned more about Hunter X-47 and its origins. It had come from a species called the Vakari, beings of great intelligence and spiritual depth, who lived in harmony with their environment. The Federation, specifically a Black Ops division that officially didn't exist, had raided their world, taking the strongest and most capable for conversion into Hunter units. Hunter X-47 had been among the finest of its people, a scholar and artist, whose mind had been forcibly modified to create the perfect assassin. But the core of who it had been remained buried beneath layers of conditioning and biological alteration. Elisa's acceptance had awakened that buried self, creating the malfunction that had saved both their lives. Together, they established a new life on the rogue planet. Elisa continued her research, now aided by Hunter X-47's vast knowledge of galactic biology. The creature she learned its original name had been Vaethys, though it seemed to prefer the designation that had brought them together, proved to be an eager and insightful collaborator. Their work together produced discoveries that challenged fundamental assumptions about life in the galaxy. They documented species thought extinct, developed new theories about consciousness and evolution, and created a body of knowledge that would have revolutionized scientific understanding if anyone had been there to see it. But perhaps more importantly, they had found something neither had expected to discover genuine companionship. Elisa learned to interpret the subtle changes in Hunter X-47's camouflage patterns as expressions of emotion. The creature in turn adapted to human customs and even attempted to understand human art and literature. Years passed in this way. The galaxy moved on without them, the Federation's rigid order continuing to suppress individuality and difference. Occasionally, other refugees would find their way to the sanctuary former Federation weapons who had somehow broken their conditioning, dissidents fleeing persecution, even a few humans who had escaped the growing restrictions on their kind. Each new arrival enriched their small community, but none changed the fundamental bond between Elisa and Hunter X-47. They had saved each other in ways that went far beyond mere physical rescue. She had given it back its soul. It had shown her what true understanding could look like. On quiet evenings, when the bioluminescent gardens were at their brightest, Elisa would often find Hunter X-47 in what she had come to call its meditation pose, a graceful arrangement of limbs that spoke of the Vicari's spiritual traditions. Sometimes she would join it sitting in comfortable silence as they watched the light patterns of the life forms around them. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one such evening. "Choosing to save me instead of completing your mission." Hunter X-47's response when it came was a complex melody of sounds that her universal translator had long since learned to interpret. Regret was a concept that required the assumption of a better alternative path. Given what they had built together, what they had learned about themselves and the universe, no such alternative existed in its understanding. Elisa smiled, watching the patterns shift across its skin like thoughts made visible. "I love you too," she said simply, because that's what the creature had really been saying, and what she had been meaning to tell it for longer than she cared to admit. The irony was not lost on her. The Federation had sent their most perfect predator to eliminate what they saw as a threat. Instead, they had brought together two souls who would find in each other everything they had been missing. The hunter slept peacefully by her side, now no longer a weapon, but simply Vaethis Elisa's partner in all things, the being who had chosen love over duty and life over death. In the end, the galaxy's loss was their gain. While the Federation continued its rigid march toward stagnation, two unlikely allies had found a way to thrive in the spaces between worlds, creating something beautiful from the ashes of what had been intended as tragedy. The last entry in Elisa's journal, written on the 5th anniversary of their escape, read simply, "Today, Hunter X-47 brought me wildflowers from the thermal gardens. They glow with the same light as its eyes when it's happy. I think we've found what home actually means, not a place or a species or an ideology, but a choice to cherish something precious together." And in the margin, written in the flowing script that Hunter X-47 had adapted to express its thoughts in human language, were the words, "The predator and the prey who chose to be neither." The beginning of a new story. The stars shone down on their rogue world, indifferent and eternal, witness to a love that had defied every expectation of what was possible between two beings from different species, different worlds, different destinies. The galaxy had intended to end Dr. Elisa Marrow's story with violence. Instead, she and Hunter X-47 had rewritten it as something far more powerful, a testament to the transformative power of understanding, acceptance, and the courage to choose connection over conflict. As they slept that night in their shared quarters, surrounded by the gentle hum of their research equipment and the soft glow of bioluminescent life, the universe seemed a little less dark, a little more full of possibility. The Federation might rule the stars, but here in the spaces between two unlikely souls, had found something that no amount of political power could create or destroy. They had found each other, and in doing so had found themselves.